Welcome back! In our last lesson, we started learning how we can interact with our canvas element by getting the context of our canvas, and we started learning how we can actually draw on our canvas element. In this lesson, we're going to go ahead and continue where we left off, and we're going to learn how we can draw images, text, and gradients to our canvas element. So to get started, if you can go ahead and go into your project folder, if you can go ahead and go into the 40-Canvas Drawing 2 folder, then in the Start subfolder, if you can open up main.js, then in your browser, if you can go ahead and open up the index.html page that's in the Start subfolder, you should see Canvas Drawing Part 2. Alright, so to get started, what we're going to do is we're going to work on drawing text to our canvas element here. So in order to draw text on our canvas element here, we'll need to go ahead and update the font property on our context object. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do draw text, and then to actually update our font property, we just go ahead and use our CTX variable, and we go ahead and do font, and then just like our other properties, we'll set it equal to the value that we would like. So we're going to go ahead and I'm just going to set this to 18 pixels, and we're going to go ahead and use the Arial font family. So two ways that we can draw text onto our screen is we can use the fill text or the stroke text methods that are available. So first we're going to go ahead and use the fill text method. So if we go ahead and do ctx dot fill text, and then this method we're going to go ahead and pass in 3 arguments. The first will be our text string that we want to write. So I'm going to go ahead and do hi there. Next will be our X and Y position of where we want to position our text element. So I'm going to go ahead and do 50 and 0. And the last argument is optional. It allows us to specify max width when we draw our text onto the canvas element. And we're going to go ahead and leave that blank for now. So if we save and refresh our page, it looks like nothing happened. So there's a good possibility we probably drew our text off our screen. So let's go ahead and change this to 50 and 20. So if we go ahead and save and refresh, there we go. Alright, so now we see we have our text drawn on our screen. It's a little bit small, so I'm going to go ahead and bump this up to 24 pixels. We'll save and refresh, and now we can see our text. So one thing you may have noticed is when we drew our rectangle in our last lesson, we started in the top left-hand corner, and that's how we positioned our element and drew it onto our canvas. However, and then with our text element, we actually started in our bottom left-hand corner here, and we drew our element from that position. So as you can see, that's why when we placed position 0, our text was actually off the page, because we started here and then we drew our text upward. And so for the reason for this is because there is a property that's set on our context that will dictate how this gets drawn to our screen. So in our console, if we go ahead and reference our CTX variable, so if we go ahead and expand our object and go to the bottom, you'll see there's a property called text baseline, and it's defaulted to alphabetic. So when text baseline is set to alphabetic, it will go ahead and start drawing our text from the bottom here. And we can change this by changing this property to be top. So if I go ahead and do ctx.text baseline, and we go ahead and set it to top, if we go ahead and save and refresh, we'll see now our text gets drawn from the top left-hand corner and gets drawn down that way. So as I mentioned, when we're creating our text, we can use the fill text method or we can use the stroke text method. So the fill text method will go ahead and actually fill in our text with the color that is specified. And because we have our fill style currently set to red, our text is also red. So to see an example of using stroke text, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and do ctx.stroke text, and then similar to our fill text method, we need to go ahead and specify our text. So we'll do hi there again, and this time we'll go ahead and position this at 100, and we'll go ahead and do position 20 as well. So go ahead and save and refresh. Oh, you see our text gets written, but it's overriding our other one. So let's go ahead and change this to 200, so our text a little bit further. There we go. So now you'll see our stroke text draws our text with our border. However, the text is not filled in with our color. So now that we know how to create text objects on our canvas element, I want to go ahead and take a look at how we can create gradients. So when we create our objects, we have the option of specifying a solid color, or we can go ahead and use gradients for filling in our objects. And with our context object, we have 2 different methods for creating gradients. The first is create linear gradient, which will create a linear gradient, and then create radial gradient will create a radial or circular gradient. And in order to create a gradient, the first thing we have to do is create a gradient object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new variable, and I'm going to call it grd for gradient. And I'm going to go ahead and set it equal to our ctx variable. And we're going to go ahead and create linear gradient. And then for our linear gradient, we need to specify 4 arguments. And this is going to be 2 sets of x and y values. And this will dictate how the gradient is actually created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 0, 0, 200, and 0. And then after we have our gradient object, we actually need to add our colors that'll be used for our gradient, so our color stops. So to do this, we need to use our gradient object, and then we're going to go ahead and call the add color stop method on our object. And then this method will go ahead and take 2 arguments. So the first argument is our offset, so this is going to be where we stop drawing with our gradient for a particular color. So basically 0 will be the left side of our gradient since it's linear, and the 1 will be a right side of our gradient since it's and since we're using a linear gradient, basically the 0 will be our left side and 1 will be our right side. So we're going to go ahead and specify 0, and we're going to go ahead and use blue for our gradient. And then we need to go ahead and specify our second stop color. So we're going to do gradient, add stop color, add color stop. We'll go ahead and specify 1, and we'll go ahead and do white. So now that we have our gradient, we actually need to specify that as our fill style. So we're going to go ahead and do ctx, fill style, and we're going to go ahead and set it equal to our gradient object. And then we actually need to draw something to our screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and copy our fill rectangle here, and we're going to place it down here. And let's go ahead and just update our position. So let's go ahead and do 250. Oh, it actually looks like we have an error. This needs to be add color stop. So if we go ahead and save and refresh, you'll see now we draw a rectangle onto our screen, and we're using our gradient that we created. Alright, so what happened here is when we created our linear gradient, we had to specify 2 sets of x and y values. So our x and y values are going to kind of dictate where our gradient basically starts getting applied from. So the first one is going to refer to the first color stop we provided, so blue. So we're starting in position 0, 0, and then that's where we're going to start placing our blue color. And then our second position is going to refer to our second color stop, so white in this case. And it's going to go ahead and start at position 200, and then it's going to go ahead and create a gradient from there. Alright, and as I mentioned, there is one other method we can use for creating gradients. So we can go ahead and create a radial gradient as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and copy these lines of code here. I'm going to go ahead and place it here. Let's go ahead and change this to gradient 2. And then instead of create linear gradient, we want to go ahead and do create radial gradient. And then let's go ahead and get rid of our arguments. So then in our radial gradient, we actually specify 6 arguments. So the first and second will be our first position for x and y value, and then the third argument will be the radius. Since we're creating a radius gradient, we need to provide a radius number for how far that gradient will go out. So we're going to go ahead and do 75, 50, 5, 90, let's do 60, followed by 100. So then I'll go ahead and let's go ahead and just change this to green, and we'll keep our 2 colors, and we'll keep our other color stop as white. And then we'll have our fill style will be set to gradient 2. Alright, and then for a rectangle, let's go ahead and do 0, 0. Let's go ahead and do 50 by 50. So we'll go ahead and make a square. So we'll go ahead and save and refresh. You'll see we create a square in the top left hand corner, and we see our gradient is being applied to it.